You are watching me, Mick, here on my YouTube channel, Movies TV Mad. You can also follow me on X, Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and on my Instagram channel, Movies TV Mad X. So come along to those platforms, come and say hi. We are here to finally, bury the DCEU and give you my final ranking. I've done rankings before, but it's over now. We've got a new entry, of course, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. You're going to find out where that is. Basically, we're ranking the entirety of the DC Extended Universe. But let me try and explain to you what the DCEU is. The DCEU started with the best of intentions by David Goyer, Christopher Nolan, and Zack Snyder to create something deep and serious that was part of a franchise but continued. They were telling a story, an interesting story. Some of the things we were going to get that we didn't get, which was a Michael Shannon and Russell Crowe kind of Jor-El Zod prequel Krypton story that never happened. How sad is that? Goyer was going to do that. A prequel Krypton movie. We missed out. We missed out big. Now, I know there's a bunch of crybabies out there who hate Zack Snyder and hate what Goyer were about to do, but I don't. I'm a lover of this type of filmmaking, and I love what we got originally. But then you've got the whole backstory and history of what happened to Zack Snyder. But don't forget, Christopher Nolan and Goyer were booted out way before Snyder was. They got Man of Steel, and because that didn't make $1 billion or $2 billion or whatever unreasonable box office targets WB had at the time, because Man of Steel didn't make that type of money, they were booted off the property. But it was too late to boot Zack off because he was already in post-production on BvS. BvS, partially an idea of the studio as well, because Superman didn't bring home the bacon that they wanted. Greed, greed, greed. Greed overall. That's the story of the DCEU, everyone. And that's, my friends, that's why it failed. So let's start with my ranking. Look, and as I say, the DCEU is a two-structured franchise. The first part, as I say, started with good intentions. The second part makes no sense to me. I don't understand where we were going with Justice League, Shazam, Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 84. These were just movies. Now, don't get me wrong. If they had decided just to make individual standalone movies that were actually good and worked, I'd be okay with that. It doesn't have to be one big arc like Zack was doing or like Feige was doing and still is doing with the MCU. That's okay. It doesn't have to be that. I'm a big fan. I think the future should be more standalone because I think people are just done with cinematic universes. But it didn't make sense what the idea was. They decided to go away from Superman, from what Snyder was doing, and give you a lot of bright colours and bad gags, but the movies weren't very good. If you are, to me, people say to me, oh, Mick, people were desperate for me to do this ranking. The first part of this ranking, well, it's a bit difficult because there's so many crap movies in my bottom half of the pile that I could literally just throw them all at you and say I don't need to number these. But I will. I will number them, but I think it's kind of difficult because they're all as bad as each other, up to a certain point. But we'll get into that as well. So obviously at number 16, I think I would be roasted if I didn't put Justice League at number 16. Justice League is the betrayal of Zack Snyder, taking what Snyder built with his Justice League and his Man of Steel, BvS, and all of that. What Snyder was doing was very interesting. To me, listen, it doesn't have to be interesting to you, but on an artistic standpoint, not a budgetary box office standpoint, because a lot of you act like you're fucking accountants. Oh, his movies made this money and cost that and the marketing. I couldn't give a shit because Snyder's movies made just under 700, 850 or around that, even more than that. And then the Snyder Cut was According to WB, the fourth most streamed movie of 2021, Zack Snyder's Justice League, we're talking about, of course. So these movies were successful. I don't know what the profit margins was, and I don't care. I'm not a fucking accountant, and I don't have shares in WB. What I'm telling you is the actual money they brought in, not profits, but the money they brought in was higher than anything than from Shazam onwards. So they got rid of Snyder because they wanted profit over art. And quite simply, this decision didn't work. And we all know that. And we can natter forever. Because I know a load of you hate Zack Snyder. Basically, I think a lot of you hate Zack Snyder more than you probably do child-abusing directors. That's the kind of world we live in today. Crazy. You're all nuts. I don't want to talk to you. Go away. Leave me alone. Leave me and my subscribers who actually like a balanced conversation alone, because you're boring at this point. Your hatred for Snyder is illogical, but I'm not a here for Zack person. You know that. I'm a movie fan. I'm a TV fan. I'm a DC fan. I'm a fan of a lot of things in entertainment. I'm not just here for one director. It happens that I admire Zack Snyder's sensibilities as an artist, storyteller, and a person. Very nice man. Very, very nice man who doesn't deserve the hate he gets. But welcome to the world of the fucking internet. Doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. What were we talking about? Justice League. So Justice League is a demonstration of a betrayal of Snyder's artistry, artistic integrity, artistic freedom. Look, people like to blame Justice League on Joss Whedon entirely. Look, Joss Whedon is a really good writer-director. He proved it with Buffy, he proved it with Angel, he proved it with that little space travelling show he was doing, and he did a movie of that. I forgot what it was called. You know me and titles and names. You know, this brain's still going a day later. It's always going to be going. I'm always going to be forgetting stuff. Anyway, so Joss Whedon, very talented guy. When I first heard he was taking over Zack, and he was a mate of Zack's, I was kind of excited. But look, I'm not stupid. I've been around the industry for too long. I know too many people in the industry not to understand what was going on here, even though I was kind of excited about it, because it did look like they'd fired Zack Snyder and brought in Joss Whedon. But for me, because it was Joss Whedon, because prior to that I didn't know that he was problematic, don't forget that, we didn't know what was going on. I thought that Joss Whedon, at the very least, because he was a talented guy, because he was the guy who gave us Buffy, Angel, and all that other stuff, I thought he even co-wrote the first Toy Story. Very talented guy. So I thought, okay, they brought in Joss, they want it to be more Marvel, okay, but it's Joss Whedon. It's going to be a great Justice League. This could be a great start. But at the end of the day, Joss Whedon was told what to do. And that was the problem. This wasn't a vision of Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon was told to recycle this movie and inject bright colours and bad gags into it. Right? And it was rushed. It was horrible. The VFX was fucking embarrassing. Steppenwolf, what a fucking joke. I mean, horrible. I mean, you know, Hines' voice work, is it Kieran Hines? I think it's Ciaran Hines. Is it Kieran or Ciaran? Anyway, he's a really good voice actor. And I think he voiced him in both versions of Justice League. He did a fine job. He weren't the problem. But visually, Steppenwolf in Justice League was a fucking disgrace. This movie is a fucking disgrace. It's everything that's wrong with entertainment today. It's the MCU thing. It's the money over the art. But there's a lot of art in the MCU. Don't get it twisted, right? The first few movies were very, very good. Phase 2 is okay in places. Phase 3 is okay in places. None of it's perfect, by the way, but it's making money. But if your idea of great movies is them making money, then you and I are going to fall out. We have a problem. I love Masters of the Universe, starring Dolph Lundgren. He's a totally bad pick for He-Man. But I enjoy the movie. It's fun. You can enjoy bad movies that don't make money. That's okay. But Justice League really is typical of what was going on in the DCEU after Snyder left. Most of those movies were interfered with. That was the problem. There was no definitive vision after Snyder left. As I say, it started with the best of intentions, but then a studio got nervous about the reactions and the critics and all of that. And at the end of the day, you end up with a fucking mess. I mean, I believe that Justice League is one of the worst moments in New Hollywood. It's one of the worst moments in Hollywood history. It is so bad. It is indefensible. I mean, you can like that tease of a Flash Superman race, because I do as well, right? I think that bit's cool, that post-credit scene. But it don't fix anything. It doesn't mean they were right to do what they did, but it's a cool moment. Don't get me wrong. But ultimately, it didn't work. They removed Snyder, they recycled his Justice League movie, and it was fucking shit. It's despicable, it's depravity, and then we found out from Ray Fisher and the rest of them how Joss treated them. But the truth is, Joss hated them, he never cast them, and they hated him. It was a nightmare scenario. Everyone and no one was to blame. Ultimately, you can't blame the cast and you can't blame Joss. Joss was put in an impossible situation. All he wanted to do was get that Batgirl movie. And it's a shame he didn't, because I believe he's talented enough to make a great Batgirl movie if he made his own Batgirl movie. If he made his own Justice League movie, it would have been great. He's a talented man. But he didn't make his own Justice League movie. He just recycled Zack's, and that's where the problem lies. From that moment, the DCEU was fucked, because people who had no idea, let alone about superheroes and comics, have no idea how to put together a movie. Because I've told you this before, all the great titans, all the great CEOs from the past have gone. And this is why this industry is fucking dead now. It's just a bunch of fucking, extremist politicians, politically motivated people. And they're all fucking mad. They don't know how to entertain people. They don't even want to entertain people. And there lies the problem. Justice League at number 16. At number 15, Wonder Woman 84. Somewhere, there's a great version of this movie. But, where are we? It ain't this. There are some good stuff here. But as a movie, it doesn't work. You can't have Steve Trevor's ghost going into an alive body, and Wonder Woman riding the hell out of this man without his consent. If, for example, Lois Lane had died right and then came back and went into another woman's body, and Superman was shagging her, you imagine what the extremists in Hollywood and in the media would have said, and all the pundits. They would have went fucking mad. But it's okay when it's a woman doing it to a man, isn't it, you fucking hypocrites? Anyway, so basically, this is what I mean. This movie doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it's no surprise that she never got to do her Wonder Woman 3. But it's interesting, we don't know who the fuck Wonder Woman is. If it's Gal, she says yes, maybe. Gunn kind of says, yeah, you just don't know where you are anymore. That's the problem. That's just another video. We've discussed this before. We will discuss this further in the future. But I never wanted Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman 3 because I think it was going to suck. Because this movie, the CGI, she fired every one of Zack Snyder's VFX team. Now, don't get me wrong, DJ was working on the Flash movie, and a lot of that VFX wasn't great. DJ is the VFX supervisor that Zack normally works with. But it's okay to have the VFX supervisor on that team, and they're great guys and they're great people, right? They're great men and women. They're really good at what they do. I'm not criticising them. But ultimately, without Zack Snyder, it doesn't pop as much. Because Zack Snyder is the ultimate DP. Great director of photography. He understands visual storytelling. So you've got those people, but those people are going to be directed by somebody else who's rushing them. And the Flash movie is a fucking mess. We'll get there, right? The narrative of this movie doesn't make sense in terms of Steve Trevor coming back. Steve Trevor should never have been in this film, period. That's the truth. Let's be honest about this movie. but they were scared. Because one of the secrets that they don't want you to know is that one of the main reasons the first film did so well financially is because Chris Pine brought in a lot of people. Chris Pine brought in a lot of women. You could argue that most of the women watching Wonder Woman 2017 were watching for Chris Pine. Because secretly, what they'd done cleverly, they had given us a male lead in Steve Trevor. Because they didn't really have faith that Gal Gadot could pull this film off. The first film, she doesn't pull this one off, by the way, but she's not a great actor. She's a great Wonder Woman. She looks great as Wonder Woman, and when she's directed by Zack Snyder, somehow Zack Snyder brings something out of her, and it works. She's a much better Wonder Woman in the Snyder Cut and in the first Wonder Woman. But it's clear that they felt she needed a co-lead. And don't get it twisted. And we'll get into the first film, because I love the first film, as you know. But, you know, without a co-lead, I don't think she can do it. And I think this is why they gave her a co-lead in the first film, and this is why they were nervous about her being in this film on her own. But they did have Kristen Wiig in this movie. They did have Pedro Pascal. They could have had her and Kristen Wiig. I mean, they had her as mates, but they could have really had them sharing scenes and having a really tight friendship before it breaks down for a definitive reason. And then it's compelling and it works when she turns into Cheetah. But they didn't even do that. But you know what? There's a great history for Cheetah in the comics. They didn't use it. I don't even understand what they were fucking trying to do with Cheetah. Whatever Patty and Jeff, a comic book guy for fuck's sake, who knows what works in comics and doesn't. I don't know what they were planning. I don't know the idea of this movie. I don't think they do either. Their motivation was to give us a Maxwell Lord that identified Donald Trump. Because that's the thing. That was the thing then, it still is. They're obsessed with Donald Trump. Now, I don't like Donald Trump, but I don't want to hear him, I don't want to see him torn to pieces in every fucking movie. That does nothing for me. That's just a childish thing to do. When I was a kid, I used to do my own soap opera on audio tape, and I used to play all the parts. And if someone at work had annoyed me, or a friend had annoyed me, I'd do something to their character, because it's all based off my real life. Because I was a kid then, I was a teenager, right? So I'd make whoever annoyed me during the day look stupid in my soap. So it's a childish thing to do. That's what I'm trying to tell you. But this film really is an utter disappointment. It's not going anywhere. It's obviously trying to lead into a Wonder Woman 3, but to me, I'm not excited. And I mean, with Linda Carter, they really could have had, this was an opportunity to create the DC multiverse and have Linda Carter as the Wonder Woman from another universe. That could have been the post-credit scene. Her Wonder Woman in her original get-up. And maybe in Wonder Woman 3, an old Wonder Woman versus a young Wonder Woman team-up. Not versus, but a team-up. That would have been fun. But what they had her doing in the end was very feminist. You could tell what they were attempting to do. She plays a character that's basically, a bunch of men are trying to kill, right? To get to the rest of the Amazons. The messaging is clear in this film. There are some good moments in this film, but ultimately, as a film, it doesn't work. The opening mouse sequence is a fucking joke. It's embarrassing, and it's blasphemy to any artist who ever wants to make a film or whoever has attempted to make a good film. The truth of the matter is, Patty Jenkins isn't a very good director. That's the truth. This film proves it. Because it proves that Zack Snyder did most of the good work in the first Wonder Woman, because this is the person who made this film. How can the person who made this film made the first Wonder Woman film as well? Does it make sense to you? Can you say to me, Mick, I can understand how the person who directed this film directed the first film. It's clear she barely directed the first film, but her name was on it because she's a woman. This is number 15 on my DCEU ranking. Where are we? Number 14. Number 14 is Birds of Prey. Birds of Prey is a vindictive, sadistic hate piece. It's hate speech. for men. This movie basically hates men. And that's what it is, right? Is it well directed in places? Yeah. Are the performances solid? Yeah. But as Grace Randolph said in her DCEU ranking, I agreed with a lot of what she said. Go and check it out. I don't agree that Black Adam is a boring movie, and I don't agree with the position she put it in, pretty low. But she didn't like this movie, and I don't like this movie. I think it's a nothing movie. This movie was a flop, like many of the movies from Shazam onwards, because again, it doesn't make sense. What's the point in this movie? What's it trying to tell, right? What's the story it's trying to tell? Oh, men taking credit for women's work. Boring. You expected to make $1 billion out of telling a hate piece, making a hate piece about men. That's what this film was all about. Now, in the end, Margot Robbie, because Margot Robbie had been looking for a film to bitch about men on that made $1 billion, and she found it with Barbie, right? Because somehow she persuaded, Greta Gerwig to direct it. And Greta Gerwig is a very, very good director who's also a feminist. Maybe if Greta directed this movie, it would have been better. Because if you're hating on men but you make an entertaining movie, well, that's better than nothing. I'd rather you don't hate on my gender. I'd rather you don't hate on any group of people in films. But you know what I mean? This is the era we live in. This is nothing like the Birds of Prey in the comics. They're dressed down again for feminist reasons. Harley is dressed down for feminist reasons. And basically, they're just beating up a bunch of men in this film. And it's all about men being bad and women being good. And in the end, they blow up, Black Mask's balls, private parts, blah, 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 blah. It's all very, very transparent. It's not a very good movie. And it's full of hate. And I don't do well with hate. Basically, this movie sums up New Hollywood. And what did I say? Number 14. Now, there's a reason. Some of the movies, I don't have all the DCEU movies here because I gave up with this year's movies. So, basically, I don't have a deep mindset. But where are we? Let's say number 13. Let's talk about Shazam, Fury of the Gods at number 13. Shazam, Fury of the Gods is a nothing movie that does nothing. That's what it is. It's a box full of fresh air. It's basically that box that you've been looking at in wrapping paper all over October, waiting for December the 25th to open it. When you open it, it's nothing. Now, the first Shazam movie didn't make a lot of money, but it was made really cheaply because that's what the whole Hamada era was all about, making cheap films and making a profit. Unfortunately, that didn't work, but it did work with the first Shazam. But at least with the first Shazam, you get a movie that's trying to say something. It's about saying the family don't have to be blood relatives, and sometimes strangers can be family. It works. But for me, Zachary Levi never worked as Shazam. Asher Angel is a really good Billy Batson. Brilliant. I love Freddie Freeman and all of that in the first film. We'll get there. But basically, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, the sequel to the first Shazam, is a betrayal of everything they did in the first Shazam. That's the point. And, why was Rachel Zegler in this movie? She was pointless. We had 3 really good actresses in this movie that were fucking wasted as the villains. At the end of the day, it's neither a bad movie totally. It's not a great movie. It's just a movie that's there. So at number 12, where are we at number 12? We will go to the Flash movie, which isn't as bad as Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and that's why it's at number 12. The Flash movie, again, you can see, is a mixture of differing villains. Let me say that again. Differing visions. What's it? Villains. Villains is a good word, actually, because they are villains at this studio, WB. It's funny, apart from this year's DCEU movies, they're all flopped. WB did quite well with Wonka and Barbie and a few other things. They had a good year. A better year than they've had for years. Because they made better movies. But let's not talk about that. We're talking about the DCEU. All 4 DCEU movies they released this year were a disaster. So what did I say? Number 12, The Flash. Is it I don't even know what number I'm at, right, anymore. I think I'm at number 12. Where are we? I don't know what number I'm at, so fuck it. So either 13 or 12 is The Flash movie, right? The Flash movie is supposed to be a loose adaptation of Flashpoint. And if this is an adaptation of Flashpoint, it's even more shit than it would be if it wasn't an adaptation of Flashpoint. Again, this film was supposed to be... This is interesting, and this proves what a fuck up this whole thing is, whether we're talking about James Gunn's DC Universe or what Hamada was attempting to do. The Flash movie was a plan from Hamada to reboot the DCEU and create a brand new timeline. A timeline that includes Blue Beetle, Batgirl, Supergirl, and these were the plans in this movie. A movie that wanted to swap, take Superman out of the equation and replace Superman with Supergirl. So basically this was trying to make the DC Extended Universe a little bit more inclusive and woke, if you like, and a little bit more slimlined as well. So this was supposed to change the whole thing. And Hamada's idea was to use kind of Man of Steel in a way. Basically take Man of Steel and change what happened. We get Zod in the Flash movie. Why Michael Shannon agreed to play Zod in this movie, even for the small length of time that he did, I will never know. He made this big song and dance about having to ask Zack Snyder's permission. Personally, I think he was contracted to be in this movie because he'd already signed to be Man of Steel. And I think once you sign up, then you have to do it. I think it's all part of your contract. So I don't think he had a choice in the matter. That's what I think. But he probably spoke to Zack about it. But Zack probably said to him, well, you can't get out of it. You're going to have to do it. It's probably double talk. Yeah, he probably wanted to get out of it and couldn't because he was contractually obligated to do it. And so, the Flash movie has lots of problems. The best thing about it is the problematic Ezra Miller's performance playing 2 versions of this character. I said this in my review at the time. Go back, check it out. But this movie ends up being an insult. Mainly, again, to everything Zack Snyder built. Because, as I say, the second part of the DCEU is a fucking joke. It is meaningless. And this film is meaningless. But this film does bring back Michael Keaton's Batman. I like Michael Keaton's Batman in the Flash movie. At the very least, that's interesting. I like Sasha Calle's Supergirl, even though she was brought in to replace Henry Cavill as Superman. Now, I don't like that element of it, but I did like Sasha as Supergirl. And I think, at the very least, she would have been interesting going forward. And apparently they were planning for her to be in a film. Apparently, James Gunn is replacing her as Supergirl. Something, right, like the whole replacing Superman, replacing Superman with Supergirl could still happen in DC Universe. Because I still suspect he will kill off Superman at the end of Superman Legacy. AKA, why he's called it Legacy. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think there's much difference to the Gunn plan and the Hamada plan. Don't forget, co-CEO of DC Studios, Peter Safran, was also Hamada's production partner. We will see as we go forward. So that's The Flash I think at number 13. So at number 12, I'm gonna say Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle isn't a bad movie. It isn't a good movie. It does the old jig of it's all about family. And as I said before, when I go and watch a CBM, I don't want to sit there being bored with a family. I want to see the character evolve. As I say, it's okay. It's not bad. There's some okay performances here. There's some emotionally uplifting moments. There's some okay funny moments. But it isn't memorable. I wouldn't rewatch this movie, and the actor will carry on playing this character in James Gunn's universe. There's no point in replacing him. I'm not surprised it didn't make much money. It's another movie that's just an empty box full of fresh air. So at number 11, I think the best, well, no, I won't say that, but at number 11, basically I think the movie that wins out of all this year's DC movies is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. It was a much better movie in the test screening, but it still wasn't a bad movie when I saw the theatrical version of it. Yes, they've injected even more colour and even more bad gags into it. Isn't it ironic that the final DCEU movie is another movie of a multitude of visions? I think the irony isn't lost on me there. But there are some really, really good things in this movie. There's some great action in this movie. And James Wan is James Wan. And he'll always try his best. But unfortunately, James was done dirty with this film in terms of Amber Heard, in terms of Gunn interfering and giving him notes. It was never going to totally work. Who knows what type of money this film will make in the end. So I like this film a little bit more than the other DCEU movies released this year, but not by much. Now we can talk about films I've actually got here on my... So I think we're going to say, what is it? Is this the top 10? Hang on a minute. I need to figure out what number I'm at. As I thought, I cocked it up and I should have started at number 17, not number 16. So should we make a deal? Let's not talk numbers anymore. Let's just count down from this point. My rankings stand, the numbers don't stand, because I forgot about Peacemaker, which I'll tell you what I think of very, very shortly. So next on my ranking is Shazam. I think if you're a mum and a mum, bring your kids, or a dad and a dad, or a mum and dad, bring your kids to the cinema, or sitting back in an afternoon with some microwave popcorn, you can sit back and watch this film, and it's very enjoyable. There are some really good things about this movie. For example, Dr. Savannah, played by the, irrepressible Mark Strong. Savannah is the best thing about this movie. The next best thing, of course, is Freddie Freeman. And I like, Asher Angel as well as Billy Batson. This guy doesn't really work. I felt that they really needed to be more faithful, not to the new 52 version, but the original Captain Marvel. And they didn't do that. Yes, this character used to be called Captain Marvel. Then Marvel took the name for their Captain Marvel. It's all a fuck up. Let's not get into that. But basically, character used to be called Captain Marvel. They should have gone to the original comics, right? But they didn't do that. They stuck with the new 52. They went with this kind of Tom Hanks big thing. And to me, that element didn't work. It clearly worked for some families and kids. My nephews and nieces loved it at the time. I don't know now they're a bit older if they still feel the same way. I mean, this was released in 2019, was it? So I don't mind this film. I think there's a lot of good elements to it. Now, it's not a DC film that I hold closely to my heart, but I think it does out-Marvel Marvel. It does have some bright colours and some okay gags. It does have a heartfelt story. And both Billy Batson and the villain, Savannah, are dealing with rejection in their own way. And you see how Savannah deals with the rejection of his father and his brother. He murders them when he becomes the supervillain. And Billy Batson, even after being rejected, kind of forgives his mother. So two different ways. This film is about taking in non-blood relatives and still seeing them as relatives. So I think, look, this isn't a bad movie in any stretch of the imagination, but it only made just over 300 million, right? So clearly people weren't interested that much with this character. It made a profit because it cost under 100 million to make, and the director did a good job. This is a solid DC movie. I'm not going to go at it. So what have we got next? James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Now, I've discussed this on previous videos recently, but we'll get into it now. This is a well-written and directed DC movie. And look, this is my theory about the thought process behind him doing a Superman film. This was before he was given the co-CEO job at DC Studios. Now, we don't know when he wrote and directed this film if he already knew he was taking over unofficially, or there was some plans, because what you don't understand about studios, they're not all on the same side. So there could have been some people saying, let's put him in charge, and there could have been other people saying, let's put The Rock in charge. Who knows what fucking shit was going on at the time. And James Gunn's The Suicide Squad was released on day and date and during the pandemic, and a bad period of the pandemic. So that's why it was a flop, right? This did flop, but it did a lot better on HBO Max. So I like this film. I don't like what they did with Harley Quinn. They went all feminist again with Harley Quinn, as they did with Birds of Prey. James bending the knee to her sensibilities when she's killing the bloke, and all of a sudden she's a moral person, even though her and the Joker must have killed shitloads of people when, you know, they were a couple. But it's okay, Harley, all of a sudden you've got a heart. So I don't mind Harley in this film, by the way, but I didn't like these kind of feminist sensibilities that were squeezed in there. But apart from that, I really like James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. I think it's a really good, solid DC movie, and I know a lot of Snyder fans hate it and shit-talk it because, you know, they don't like James Gunn, and that's up to them. But as I've already said many times, he's a capable writer-director, but he's not, as I keep on saying, Scorsese or Coppola or even Dick Donner, right? But he's a really good modern-day writer-director. And this is a really, really good film. This is his comfort zone, a group of people who have been rejected from society, you know, and he gets you to believe in them and like them. The film works. I don't prefer this film to the first Suicide Squad, and a lot of people are going to not kind of agree with me on that. But I do think the action's brilliant. I think he tells a good story, and it really, really works. And, you know, I don't like, let me be clear, you know, I'm not happy that he killed Captain Boomerang off or Rick Flag off, because I think both those actors deserve better. For fuck's sake, think about this for a minute, right? We've got a brilliant Flash rogue villain, right? Played by a brilliant actor in Captain Boomerang, set up in the first Suicide Squad. Imagine if he is in the Flash movie and he's the main fucking villain in the Flash movie, right? Captain Boomerang versus Miller's The Flash, right? In a movie. Instead of the shit Flash movie that we actually got. Think about that for a minute. But no, they killed him off prior to the Flash movie being released. It doesn't make sense. And it's decisions like this that are beyond me. Because Jay Courtney, I didn't really rate Jay Courtney before I saw him as Captain Boomerang. But he just cooks as Captain Boomerang. He's just so good. And I think that's down to what David Ayer did with him in the first place. But even in the few minutes that we see him in this movie for, he's brilliant. Again, just imagine, James Gunn makes this guy grow a beard, suit up, and then he's killed within minutes. I mean, that's just cruel. And again, this was toxic because this was a David Ayer character. So he got rid of him. I know Captain Boomerang isn't a David Ayer created character, but you get what I mean. And it's the same with Rick Flag. Gunn has this ego that he has to make everything his. But, of course, Margot Robbie, being a woman, doesn't get killed off. Remember that how I can kill anyone off? Anyone could die in this film. And I said to you, yeah, but not Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. It's interesting, Grace Randolph said on her ranking that she doesn't think Margot Robbie gets Harley Quinn. I couldn't agree more. But I think the most Harley Quinn we got with Margot was in the first Suicide Squad movie. David Ayer certainly understood who Harley Quinn is. But, you know, after that movie, she's not Harley Quinn anymore. The cartoon's better. Anyway, cartoon, animation, whatever you want to call it. I grew up with calling these things cartoons. Anyway, I really like this film, right? I think it's a really good solid attempt at a Suicide Squad, Dirty Dozen type movie, and that's why it's next on my list. But, as I say, I don't prefer this one to the other Suicide Squad. We're getting there. So, what should we do next? Peacemaker isn't a movie, but it's a limited series, and if you put it together, it's a movie. I really like Peacemaker. I think this is James Gunn's best work ever. It really works for me. Again, some Snyder fans who follow me are going to say, but I can only talk to you from my own point of view as we do these final rankings. It doesn't change my mind that the second part of the DCEU doesn't make sense, but at least this continues from Gunn's movie. Because that's what you could have done going forward. You could have had a Gunn universe, we've got a Matt Reeves universe, we've got a Todd Phillips universe, so you could have just segregated everyone. And, this was a great second part to Gunn's The Suicide Squad universe. This is a great story of a person who is utterly flawed, but you get to know him a lot more in this series, and it's very emotional. It's funny at times, but emotional. It's dark, as we see his father's vicious hate for him. So I think it's a very interesting piece of work, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, the father's racist because people in Hollywood, from James's political standpoint, can only see racism. That's the only issue in the world, or sexism, or homophobia. Forget about starving people and poverty. They don't care about that. But anyway, apart from that, I really enjoyed Peacemaker. I thought it was a great cast. I thought they all did really well, but it was a well-written and directed limited series, and I really enjoyed it. So what's next? So I think next we're going to go with the first Suicide Squad movie written and directed by David Ayer. Well, this is the cinematic version, which was edited by a pop music video company that was definitely directed by David Ayer, but there's some scenes rewritten by Jeff Johns that David also had to direct. It's not the vision David Ayer planned. This is all part of what happened. In the first part of the DCEU, there was a plan. In the original Suicide Squad, the original plan was a Steppenwolf cameo to link into what Zack was planning. Zack chose to bring in David Ayer. David Ayer is a really good writer, director. And I'm convinced the Ayer cut is a really, really good film, and I'm still desperate to see it. But you know what? This ain't bad. This ain't no Justice League, Even though they rewrote it, and I don't like the fact that they use radio music instead of a score, but I do enjoy this movie. And I know there's a better version of Joker in David Ayer's cut, but I even enjoyed the Joker in this movie. And I thought the cameos really made the DCEU feel like a connected universe. That, I've said it before, Amanda Waller's speech about Superman changing the world when he flew across the sky. He changed it again when he didn't. I love that because that connects in to BvS. I'm glad that John's actually allowed that to stay in. The Batman cameos, the Bruce Wayne cameos were great. That moment against, Deadshot and Batman in the alleyway and the daughter standing in the way of Deadshot shooting Batman. I thought that was powerful. I thought that was brilliant. I loved that. I loved seeing Captain Boomerang versus the Flash, briefly as well. That was cool as well. We could have had more of that in a Flash movie. That was a shame as well. And I thought Ezra Miller was great in that sequence. And of course, Jay Courtney was always great as Boomer. The casting, the characterizations in this movie. I really enjoy this movie. I think it's great. And I think the other version, David's proper version of this movie, is great. And I do prefer it to the Suicide Squad. A lot of people are going to kill me for that, and that's okay. I just think this works as a connected. It works as a movie to me. It also kind of connects as a franchise piece as well with the cameos. I agree. The villain isn't great. Look, let's be honest, right? Probably in terms of what they did in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, as a villain thing, at least it kind of works more. So Enchantress doesn't work, and definitely the person they chose to play Enchantress was probably a big mistake. I don't think she's the best of actors, if I'm being honest, and Enchantress just wasn't done properly. I think you could have had an awesome version of Enchantress, and that wasn't it. So if there's any flaw in this movie, it's definitely Enchantress, and who knows, in the haircut, she may be better. But yeah, that's the weakest element of this film. But I still prefer it to the Suicide Squad. So now things get a bit difficult. But my next film in my ranking, I can't believe I messed up the numbers. So if you're still with me, you're still with me. This film is way down in Grace Randolph's DCEU ranking. I think it's number 14, 13. She thinks this is a boring, bad movie. But I can't agree. I really like this movie. It's the best out of all the DCEU movies since Shazam. So I'd say this comes before Shazam, then they get really, like, they go from bad to worse, right? So I really like this film. I thought The Rock put a great production team together. He brought his director, really well directed. The production values are great. One of the best scores by Lorne Balfe. How that they got, is it Lorne Balfe? Whatever it is. He's one of the best composers in Hollywood, and he's done a lot of good scores recently. I think the story of Black Adam works. His motivations work. He's thinking back to his son. I think, like having the JSA in this movie was a great idea. And in the comics, there is a connection between the JSA and Black Adam. I didn't realize that until I saw like the BTS and like the little videos they do on this 4K HD Blu-ray DVD. So you should check all those videos out if you haven't. But yeah, and I think, I personally think that, Hawkman was absolutely brilliant. Aldis Hodge was great casting. I thought the chemistry between him and The Rock was fantastic. But Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate is outstanding casting, and it works. And his sacrifice is absolutely fantastic. Is this a perfect movie? No, it's not. But you know why I love it the most? Because it's heart in the right place. It's attempting to make an entertaining, uplifting piece of entertainment. It's trying to be as comic book accurate as it can. And it gives us, in the end, this brilliant moment where we see Superman as well. So, it's a bit like Masters of the Universe. It's Masters of the Universe, a perfectly made film. It's an underfunded film. It's not the best made film. People can make fun of it, make fun of Dolph in it as He-Man. I wouldn't have cast him as He-Man, but at the end of the day, it uplifted me. The story and the entertainment value uplifted me. And it's the same with this film. This film's heart is in the right place. It doesn't really matter how much money it made to you and me. We don't have shares in WB. It don't fucking matter. The only thing it would have mattered, it would have been good because we would have got more and Henry Cavill would have continued as Superman, and that's the tragedy. Everything changed from this movie onwards. But I really like this movie. I go back and watch it all the time. I listen to the soundtrack all the time. I really enjoy Black Adam, and that's why it's so high up in my ranking. So next, do you know what? I'm going to tell you a little secret. I never really thought about this ranking. I've done other rankings before and I've written them down. I'm kind of plucking it out of my backside. But, every ranking I give you is the honest truth, but I haven't really thought about these final ones. They're still in my mind where to put where. But next is absolutely Aquaman. The first Aquaman is a fantastic movie. It came after Justice League. It had to work, and it did. This movie cooked. Yes, it's, gone are the darker, Atlantis colour palette that we got in the Snyder Cut. It's all bright colours, a few gags, but mostly this is a serious, deep movie, and it works. I think the score by Rupert Gregson-Williams is absolutely fantastic. I think Momoa does a great job. More importantly, James Wan does a great job, and somehow he magics a little bit of chemistry between Amber Heard and Jason Momoa, because that love story has to work to a point. but there's great action. The visuals are some of the best visuals, especially underwater visuals I've ever seen. We have Nicole Kidman, we have William Dafoe. You know, it's just a very good movie. It tells its story. It's a good, tight story. It works. It's exciting. It's, you know, it's a beautiful sensory experience. That's what I found with it as well. It's a good film. It's a, look, again, is it the best CBM ever? No, but it's really good. It's really entertaining. It pops visually. Everything works. For me, everything works. Some people think this film's a mess. I don't. I really enjoyed Aquaman. And let's see if anyone else gets to do a better version of an Aquaman movie than this. It certainly isn't the sequel, which wasn't a bad movie, but it wasn't a good one either. But this is, I love this movie. I think it's great. So now, this is the decision I have to make. This is interesting, right? So what do I choose next? So you know what's left. So this is very, very, very interesting. So I think it's only fair that next is the first Wonder Woman movie. Now sometimes this has been second on my list, third on my list. Sometimes it's even been above the rest. But not this time. This is a brilliant film. This really is one of my favourite comic book movies of all time. And let me just take this time to say this at the very least, that the DCEU has got some of the best CBMs ever made, in my opinion. Now you're going to laugh at me again, but that's my opinion and I'm entitled to it. So I love this movie. I think Gal is amazing in this film. Look, Gal isn't a great actor. And as I said earlier, when I was talking about Wonder Woman 84, basically Chris Pine and Gal Gadot are co-leads in this movie. There's no question about it. You know, Pine is an experienced director. Let me say that again. What am I talking about? Chris Pine is an experienced actor in this, you know, when he's in this film at this stage of his career in 2017. He'd already played Captain Kirk in a couple of Star Trek kind of relaunches as well, which he's a brilliant Captain Kirk. He's a really good actor, and I think he was very important for Gal in this movie. If Pine isn't in this movie, I think they may have had a few problems, because Gal, when I say Gal really isn't a great actor, Gal really isn't a great actor. She can do some things, she can do expressions, she can, you know, recite and remember dialogue, but she isn't the best of actors. We all know that. I'm not trying to be horrible to Gal. It's just the way it is. I ain't the greatest of actors either, but I do it. I at least do it amateur, with an amateur dramatic society on a stage in my theatre. I'm not in Hollywood. I'm not being paid, you know, millions and millions of dollars to do it. Gal Gadot is. So in that context, I'm allowed to give my opinion where I think she's a great actor. I don't think she is, but when she's with Zack, she pulls it off. Zack Snyder was heavily involved in this movie. Zack Snyder put this movie together. He brought in another female director, and they linked in. They agreed with what they were doing creatively. Unfortunately, Jeff Johns didn't, and they removed her, and then he brought in Patty Jenkins. That's when things became a bit of a problem, because Jenkins didn't like the too dark tone that Snyder wanted to do. So there was a lot of changes to this movie. You could tell that this movie was interfered with, but it's still a bloody good movie because Snyder's influences are there to be seen. But let's not just give Zack credit, but give Zack credit for bringing in Alan Heinberg. And Alan Heinberg, a Wonder Woman comic book writer, come up with a great story. But him and Zack constructed the story, and Heinberg, I think, wrote the screenplay. I'm not sure if Zack was involved in the screenplay, but Zack Snyder and Alan Heinberg constructed the story. Zack Snyder's fingerprints are all over this movie. And let's not get it twisted. You know, the No Man's Land sequence is Zack Snyder. We all know it's Zack Snyder. Stop giving Patty Jenkins the credit. The woman who directed Wonder Woman 84, no way can be credited for the good things of this movie. But it is one of the best. It's one of the best movies, one of the best CBMs, one of the best DC movies I've ever seen because of Zack Snyder. You take Snyder's influence away from this film, you take Heinberg's influence away from this film, you've got fucking nothing. And why Heinberg wasn't allowed to co-write Wonder Woman 84 with Jenkins, I don't know. That's on Jenkins. Either Jenkins was told by the studio you can't work with his people anymore because we've had a falling out with him, or she made the decision. It's a decision she's going to deeply regret for the rest of her life. Because basically, let's just be honest, this first Wonder Woman film is more Zack Snyder's film than Patty Jenkins' film. And it's fantastic. And again, Rupert Gregson-Williams, brilliant composer, brilliant emotionally uplifting music. I love this film. I love the score. I love mostly everything about this film. This is a top tier CBM. So now it's very, very interesting where I go next. And it's basically a choice for me between BvS next or the Snyder Cut. So you pretty much already know. I've given it away what's going to be at number one. But it doesn't matter. Stick with me. Stick with me. Woo, I think it's an interesting one. I think we're going to say Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice is number 3. We can actually now start saying the numbers because there's only 3 fucking left. So Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice is number 3 in my ultimate DCEU final ranking. This is one of the best CBMs ever made. And it's a controversial one, right? It's a controversial film because you've got Batman branding people. It's a very damaged Batman. You've got pundits calling out Superman. You've got a senator from Kentucky who wants to rein him in. It's a very interesting look at Superman. But what it is, it's a deep analysis of Batman and Superman. It's like throwing them in our world and saying, right, let's judge them in reality. And it's interesting. And it wasn't everyone's cup of tea. I believe because WB marketed this as a WWF brawl between Batman and Superman. It gave people the wrong impression of the movie, and they were underwhelmed because they expected it. It is about expectancy, and they didn't get what they expected. I think that was part of the problem with BvS, but there's no question about it. BvS is a very indie, expensive CBM. There's no question about that, and you either like it or you hate it. But I think this is a brilliant film. It's a great introduction for Wonder Woman. I don't have a problem with the CCTV footage where we see the other Justice League characters introduced. I personally think Eisenberg is an outstanding Lex Luthor. Again, when I heard he was cast, I was like, hey. But I thought his performance was really, really good. It isn't typical comic book Lex Luthor or previous other movies or Michael Rosenbaum Lex Luthor, but I think there's elements that are very comic book accurate. For example, his deep hatred for Superman in the comics and in the animated series is in this movie. So I thought Eisenberg was a great Lex Luthor. This film has a lot of deep takes, and I really enjoyed it. I came out after watching the theatrical version that, cut half an hour from this movie. And I was just emotionally drained. I was in tears. I loved it. I thought this was a very powerful movie. I thought I'd seen the best film since The Dark Knight. You'll laugh. Maybe you'll laugh. But I did. I thought critics and I thought this would get, again, you're going to laugh, but I came out of the cinema thinking this was going to be a critically acclaimed awards darling. I thought that's how good this fucking film was. But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. Maybe 20 years ago, people would have lauded this film, but not today when everyone wants colourful movies with bad gags injected into them. But to me, this is a powerful movie, and it's one of the best CBMs ever made. Zack Snyder's Justice League. What an achievement this film is. They will never make a team-up movie like this. There hasn't been a team-up movie made like this since Watchmen. This is really the Watchmen of, Watchmen is now part of DC anyway. But, I think this is as close as DC, like in terms of its iconic characters will come to Watchmen. But it's a very interesting take as the Justice League. because this is a 4-hour movie, it has time to pop, it has time to breathe, and it works in that element. It has all, look, if you like Zack Snyder and you haven't seen this film, you're going to love this film. It's a great CBM if you like art, if you like kind of that visionary standpoint. It's very, very different. It's not the Avengers. It's not Avengers Age of Ultron, and it's certainly not Infinity War. But for me, this film is amazing. The themes, the way it introduces each individual Justice League member is also genius. The way we see Cyborg introduced very emotionally. We see him helping the woman who's being turfed out of her room. And he gives her money using his cyborg powers. And I think that's a brilliant moment as well. We see his story. We see the Flash's story. Really, really good. We see how Batman's struggling with his guilt after Superman's died. And he's desperate to put the team together. I just think it's excellent. Wonder Woman is excellent. As I say, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman is at her best when Zack Snyder is directing her. Jeremy Irons is at his best in this movie as Alfred. Ben Affleck as Batman is absolutely fantastic. But this film is... Look, as I say, you either like Zack Snyder or you don't. He's like Marmite. You're either, he's an unconventional... We've discussed this before. I didn't even mean for this to go on as long as it has. But I suppose there is a lot to say about this franchise. I haven't even spoken half of what I wanted to say. Because this franchise is like, the hole Alice goes into in Alice in Wonderland. It's just a deep black hole, this franchise, isn't it? It's been a sensational kind of experience being a commentator on it. But this is a very, very special movie. This is one, again, like BvS, one of the best CBMs ever made. It's compelling, it's unique, it's different, it's a sensory thrill like all of Snyder's movies. It's fantastic. So, as the DCEU ends, I don't think there's a better movie in this franchise than Man of Steel. And it's the introduction to this franchise. This movie, I better not do that because it's going to pop up on my laptop. Yeah, this movie sums up what I was saying at the beginning of the video. That this franchise started with the best of intentions. Man of Steel was the best of intentions. It had the best of intentions. It came from an idea from David Goyer. And the story was co-penned by Christopher Nolan. And then Goyer went and wrote the screenplay. And Snyder directed it, but him and Goyer worked together because this is what I'd say. The written story is by Nolan and Goyer. The screenplay is by Goyer. But the visual storytelling, obviously, is by Zack. I think Man of Steel is one of the best CBMs, like the other ones I've spoken about. I think it's a brilliant modern-day take on Superman. And it really, really, for me, it works. Again, visually, this is Zack Snyder. I watched a movie the other day. And I was watching, the Battle of Metropolis is probably one of my favourite CBM moments of all time. It is brilliant, visually stunning. It pops. But it looks like they just made it the other day. And this is how good Snyder is at visuals, at CG, at green screen. But the story, the Krypton sequence, fucking amazing. And he's right. The Krypton sequence and what he does on Rebel Moon are very, very, very similar. But the Krypton sequence is great. Crow is fucking kicking the shit out of everyone, soldiers, Zod. And the only reason Zod gets the better of him, is because he surprises him when he stabs him, when Lara launches the spaceship. Michael Shannon is in this movie, as you all know, as Zod. For me, this is the best supervillain performance ever. And it's the best written supervillain ever. Do you know why? Because he's not enjoying doing what he's doing. He genuinely wants to save his people and bring his race back. He's not, he's not destroying Earth and killing humanity and cackling. He ain't happy about this. He feels he has to do this to save his race. This is what he was built as a clone to do. He knows nothing else. And this is why this is an excellent villain. Because as far as he's concerned, he's the hero of his story. That's what I like about this villain. Because at one point, he was the hero of Krypton. He and Jor-El were friends. Jor-El loved this dude. He was a hero to Jor-El. But because of the leadership of Krypton, and it happens in the real world, doesn't it? This guy was grounded down. And then he ends up being kind of a murderer. And he loses all the values he once had. Life can do this to you. And this is very realistic at how people lose hope in the real world. But Michael Shannon Zod, don't get it twisted, is one of the best villains we've ever seen in a CBN. And he's one of my major highlights from this film. But then you've got characters like Colonel Hardy and Swanwick, who are also great small-time characters in the film. I think they're excellent. And if we had an MOS2, we would have seen them again. Maybe. I know that Hardy was sucked into the Phantom Zone. But I think we would have seen the Phantom Zone if Goya and Nolan were allowed to cook and Snyder was allowed to direct a sequel. But because this studio was reactive, we lost the best of intentions. We allowed people to say stupid things, too much destruction. Superman shouldn't have killed Zod. Whether we should have Superman killing or not is a moot point. Now, obviously, this divided people. It's true. If Superman doesn't break Zod's neck in this movie, it probably would have made more money. And it probably wouldn't have been as divisive. But this was a film directed by Zack Snyder. Not that the neck breaking of Zod had anything to do with Zack. This was on Goya. There's no question about that. But it's a brilliant movie. It's my favourite movie in the DCEU. And as we close off this ranking, I'd love to hear your rankings too. But as I look at a lot of these films, mainly the ones made by Snyder and a couple of others, I feel, can James Gunn compete with the very best of the DCEU? We're going to find out in 2025. But Man of Steel is going to be a hard one to compete with. Good luck, James, because Man of Steel has a lot more fans than you think.